It's been a couple weeks since I sat in front of this camera and actually filmed a long form video here, so pardon me if I'm a little bit rusty. After doing the last few videos in the series within a series, I needed a bit of a long form video break. Other than that video I just filmed and uploaded about me eating the lemon because of the tweet. But yeah, I enjoyed doing this at the end of last year, so I'm gonna do it again this year. I know some of you might have seen the community post that I made here on the channel about the favorite games of 2024 video. I'm still gonna do that, but again, I still have quite a few games left to play that came out this year. I don't think I'll be able to beat all of the games that I haven't gotten to play this year that I wanted to play, but I'd like to beat more than a few. Until then though, we got this video to do, so welcome back to I Want to Talk About, the series where I take a topic, I sit on camera, and I blabber about it. And as you can tell from the title today, I want to talk about some albums I didn't review in 2024. It should be obvious, but when it comes to the albums that I do review in a given year, they don't represent all of the albums that I listen to, like point blank period. Whether it's reviews or not, I'm listening to about an album a weekend, sometimes multiple albums in a weekend, plus the albums that I'm listening to for the 10 Years Later video, plus I'm keeping up with my job, so there's that, and I have other artistic ventures that I am focused on, so not acting like I'm the internet's busiest music nerd like Anthony Fantano or something like that, but when you're listening to as much music as I listen to in a given year, sometimes you just don't have enough to say about an album for a review. Even now, doing the whole TikTok style of review where I'm just doing a minute each, sometimes there's still not even enough to get a minute out. So I started doing this last year and I really enjoyed it. I thought it would be fun to give you some albums that I didn't get to review this year, just give you some light thoughts, help understand maybe why I didn't review them. Because this year, there were quite a few. I didn't even count. It's like at least 20-something. There was a lot this year that I listened to that I didn't do a proper review of, so we're just gonna jump right in, not make this intro any longer than it already is. Perhaps the most popular, commercially speaking, albums that I didn't review this year. I didn't review VULTURES, not even out of protest. I know there were some people who didn't review these things basically out of protest because of Kanye's, you know, Kanye-ness. Admittedly, I was kind of waiting to see if the full trilogy would actually come out. Yeah, silly me for thinking that. So that was one part of it, but the other part was I just didn't care enough about the records to actually do a full review. Like, I just didn't really feel like it, especially after listening to them. Part 1 had come out on the same weekend as Usher's new album, which I reviewed, and I actually quite enjoyed it. And Part 1's not the worst thing that Kanye's put out, but to me, it was definitely the least interesting at the time that it came out, because at least Jesus is King was like an intriguing kind of bad, but VULTURES 1 was just blatantly forgettable. Like, I don't remember much of the album outside of obviously Carnival because it was a big hit, and I'm gonna say it, but I've been noticing this for quite some time now. Independent of his views and his writing and his lyricism and whatnot, Kanye as a performer has fallen off a cliff lately. Like, his actual rapping on VULTURES 1 is consistently, to me, like, the worst part of the album. Even on Carnival, like, that's one of the things that ruins the song for me, because on Carnival, it sounds like he's fighting to stay on the beat. Like, he's running out of breath. With that said, VULTURES 2, which came out on the same weekend, incidentally, as Khalid's new album, which I was more interested in, VULTURES 2 might actually take the cake as Kanye's worst project at this point. Like, wow, I can't believe VULTURES 2 exists in the form that it does. I'm shocked. I mean, it exacerbates a lot of the problems that I had with the first VULTURES record, but the problem is it feels damn near unfinished. And not like, you know, charmingly so, like a Life of Pablo type thing where, oh, he could update it a little bit. No, this thing sounded like it just wasn't anywhere near ready to go. Like, the production's fine, but again, Kanye sounds like he barely cares. And much like Part 1, Dolla sounds good, but there are points where I feel like he's barely even there. It's not a Kanye and Dolla project, it's a Kanye project featuring Dolla. And that's the worst thing that can happen with a collaborative project. It almost feels on this record, and perhaps VULTURES 1 as well, like Kanye kind of feels like his features should be honored to work with him, and that he should basically just sit back and put on a show like he always does while everyone else actually puts in the effort. Because yes, I am very tired of him turning everything into a show. And I mean, oh my god, the goddamn structure of this album is WOOF. He makes an 8-second track for Isabella, a separate track for Husband, and then literally attaches both to the end of Lyfestylë with no changes whatsoever. I don't know, someone's gonna tell me maybe he changed the record since it came out so it doesn't sound like that. I don't care. The fact is, that's what it sounded like at first. And hey, I mean, we really love hearing Kanye's 6-year-old daughter talking about how she likes to have fun all day, immediately followed by a track where Young Thug is talking about big booty bitches. If that ain't a Kanye album, I don't know what the hell is. And don't even get me started with Ye using AI vocals on Field Trip in Sky City. Like, what the fuck was he thinking? Like, you are Kanye. Why do you need to have an AI do your rapping for you on your own album? Worst of all, in this whole chronology with the whole Vultures thing, the Vultures duology, I had written trilogy because I was expecting a third one to come out, but nevertheless, the Vultures duology commits what I think is the cardinal sin of Kanye music. By being boring as fuck. Like, again, even with a record like Jesus is King, which I previously thought was Kanye's worst, at least it wasn't a boring kind of bad, it was just a curious kind of bad. But here, oh my god, these records are boring as fuck. Like, I am just tired, and yeah, I maybe could have done a review of Vultures 2, because it would have gotten an awful if I reviewed it, but oh god, I didn't. I wanted to forget the thing even existed. You know, I was actually tempted to review this new Jason Derulo album when it came out earlier this year, until I saw that it was 27 tracks. Yeah, no. I did end up skimming through it because, for those that don't know, Spotify has this new feature where you can kind of skim through an album, and I use that for some records that I don't actually feel like listening to, which I've done for a couple here. That's why these are here and not in proper reviews. So I skimmed through it just to get an idea of what it sounded like, but I just kind of found it generic in a way that didn't make me particularly angry. Like, it wasn't good, but it wasn't really anything that interesting. I at least liked the track that had Alexandra Shipp on it because I love her, but otherwise, yeah, the album didn't really do all that much for me. And honestly, I mean, why was SMYLE included on this album? Like, that track was 7 years old at the time this album came out. Like, what is it doing here? That's nuts. I mean, yeah, it's not absolutely horrible, just an album that felt like it was several years too late. Two other albums that came along this year that were pretty well-liked and pretty popular. I kind of skimmed through both of them because I'm not that huge into Yeat, so I just decided to skim them just to see what they sounded like. And I pretty much felt the exact same way about both. I think the production was incredibly creative across the two of them, but I just personally wasn't really that enthralled with Yeat as a performer. I don't know what it is, but his flow and his voice really don't actually do that much for me. Like, Yeat is one of the many who have been really big in the whole rage rap style, and at least with someone like a Playboi Carti, at least his voice is kind of funny to me. At least he kind of goes into those goofy inflections, but Yeat, I don't really care as much for his kind of bored, for lack of a better word, sound. I'm glad he had such a big year between these two albums, but neither of them really did that much for me. I feel like I'm one of the few people that still actually checks for Kyle's music, but I didn't review SMYLE Again because it came out the same weekend as Ariana Grande's new record, which obviously took greater priority. I think it had some very solid singles, but there was a fair chunk of filler that definitely dragged this thing down, just like his last record that came out in 2022. It's Not So Bad is the name of that one. And yeah, it unfortunately feels like the record doesn't stand out nearly as well as an album like Light of Mine, which I'd still say is Kyle's best work. Though I will say that the track Sweetest Thing did make me feel genuinely emotional. It was a track that he made, you know, he was coping with the passing of his father, and he actually cried on the song like while he was singing. I can tell that was a hard track for him to make, and that was a really good one, so shout out to Kyle on that one. As far as his collab album with Steven Shaeffer, Level 1, At Least It Was Fun, it's a fun, if very horny, collection of songs that honestly didn't really stick too much with me outside of a few catchier choice cuts. And compared to an album like SMYLE Again having a lot of filler, a lot of the songs on this project were a bit too short, so it felt like they just didn't leave too much of an impression for me. If nothing else, while neither album was amazing to me, I'm at least glad I can always count on Kyle to give me a few tracks I can really rock with. Honestly, Don McLennon's album, The Changing of the Trees, was one I was very much looking forward to listening to, but it came out at a pretty bad time of the year for me on a personal level, and it also came out on Beyonce's weekend, so that didn't really help. And unfortunately, I was a little bit disappointed in it. I was initially really excited for it because Dom was always one of my favorite members of Brockhampton. A part of me also thought he was possibly the best pure rapper of the group, because to me, like, Joba and Bareface were my favorite members, especially Bareface, but Those guys were more singy. Well, Joba mixed between the two, but you get the point. Dom was the best of the pure rappers, and I always loved his pen game and his flows, but this record just didn't really do all that much for me for one reason or another. It was technically sound, but just not super interesting to me. And that's a shame, because Dom, like I said, was one of the most talented members of the group, but this solo record just didn't quite do all that much for me. I still have full faith in him, but this record just kinda went in one ear and out the other. It's probably a good thing that J. Cole listened to his mixtape title with 7 Minute Drill. I honestly kind of slept on this one because it surprise dropped the same weekend as Bryson Tiller's new record, which I was more interested in, and it didn't help that I had heard 7 Minute Drill and thought it was kind of a pitiful diss. I skimmed through the record and I thought the material didn't sound too bad, it just wasn't among his most interesting stuff, most especially coming off his 2021 album The Off Season, which was to me one of his best works. It's probably the best for Cole that this project, one that seemed to be rushed out in the wake of Like That, got overshadowed by the subsequent battles between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. I know Cole apologizing for making 7 Minute Drill and stuff like that was pretty controversial, but I think it was for the best that he did, given how much uglier it got. I didn't review Childish Gambino's Atavista because I just kind of took it as being 3:15:20 but better / finished. I figured there wasn't a whole lot to say in review other than, hey, it's a record that he put out in 2020, but it just sounds better and the mixing is better. Honestly, I loved that record in its initial form, so a slightly cleaned up version of it with an extra track or two was going to be right up my alley. And while I don't know if this counts as something I can include on my best list for the year, it was definitely one of the best listening experiences that I had this year, especially because I enjoyed the original record so much. It was nice to hear the track Human Sacrifice, which was a really, really great one. And I also really enjoyed getting to rehear the track Time, which was probably my favorite record off of 3:15:20. And it sounds so much more cleaned up now, and you can actually hear Ariana Grande's vocals on it, which is amazing. So yeah, I think it's a much better record this time around. Though again, I had already enjoyed it in its previous form, so a better version of it is great news to me. To my everlasting surprise, my review of Tones and I's first album, Welcome to the Madhouse, has actually gotten some pushback across my socials, which shocked me because I had no idea that Tones and I had defenders like that. I truly hope they weren't burner accounts either. Either way, I was at least somewhat interested in this record because Welcome to the Madhouse was maybe the worst album I've ever heard. But this one came out the same weekend as Khalid's album and evidently Vultures too. And given that I wasn't ready to listen to an hour-long Tones and I album, I decided to just kind of skim through it just because I needed to hear if it was better. I mean, no way in the world could this thing be worse than Welcome to the Madhouse. And I mean, it was, yeah, but I think that title is apt because this album did feel very ordinary. A lot of very average pop songs with generic sounds and ideas, but the key difference here is that Tony's singing is not as annoying as before. She tones down, no pun intended, the caterwauling that made her last album so unbearable, and actually shows on here that she has a very nice voice when she isn't trying to sound like a monkey and a toucan getting it on. Dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, oh. I never seen you do that things you do before. So yeah, she went from damn near unlistenable to generic, which I guess qualifies as an upgrade. Good for her. Wow, Ameer picked the perfect name for this album because woof. Okay, in all seriousness, this new Ameer Vann record was not bad. It just, again, felt very forgettable. Every song is too short to make an impression to me. It almost sounded, while listening to it, like he was just kind of turning in verses that would have ended up on Brockhampton songs. And the appeal he used to bring in those classic Brockhampton songs is barely there because he's too concerned with pitch shifting his vocals. Overall, it's just not that exciting of a project to me, and while I guess it's nice to hear that he's no longer that reliant on his connection to his former band on a project, given that his last EP, Emmanuel, was extremely reliant on it. It unfortunately feels like he's just not doing anything that interesting here. And if you want to win people back after you were ousted from the group, this is really not the way to go about doing it. One of 2024's biggest breakout stars, especially late in the year, this mixtape did drop on the same weekend as Marianas Trench's new record, which I reviewed, but this was not a case of getting caught up in another project like some other records I've talked about. This was just one of those cases where an artist had their breakout project without having like a viral top 10 single on the Billboard charts or something that initially put them on my radar. Doechii first popped on my radar when she got an incredible shout out from Kendrick Lamar, who called her the hardest out, and over time that helped her name to blow up even more. So before the year closed, I chose to give her mixtape, Alligator Bites Never Heal, a look, and it was great. Doechii is such a versatile and talented artist who consistently comes through with creative and amazing flows while also bringing some beautiful R&B vocals as well. Like, she can obviously rap, but she can sing really well too, and I think her self-aware writing style is really charming to me. Even as there are several songs where I feel like Doechii is wearing some of her influences on her sleeve, I think that's not really something that deters the mixtape to me, because I still think she brings her own flavor and style to the project. I think the only slight, very slight criticism that I have about the record, and it doesn't really take away from my rating, like this would have gotten an excellent and a proper review, but the one minor criticism I have of the record is the structure. Despite featuring a hefty 19 tracks, a lot of what's here is really short, to the point where there are a few songs that I think could have been developed a little bit more. And even so, a lot of the material here is so memorable, catchy, and well performed and well written that I still felt very fulfilled by it. And if this is what she's doing on this mixtape right here, I can't wait to see what she does next when her first proper album is ready to go. Keep an eye on Doechii. She's really special. I mean, in terms of records that came out in the same weekend, this came out the same weekend as that Katy Perry album. I just ended up not feeling like reviewing it, but after listening to it, it was aight. This thing is mostly meant for hardcore Future fans, and I'm sure they'll enjoy it and have enjoyed it, but after hearing a record like We Don't Trust You, it just didn't do too much for me. That album was much better. Honestly, I even feel like We Still Don't Trust You was more interesting than this, and I wasn't that crazy about that project. Also, what the hell was Plutoski? Like, God, that track was miserable. When I saw that a new Lady Gaga project dropped, I was thinking about reviewing it, but I ended up skipping it because I kind of took it as basically a bunch of Gaga covers of classic jazz songs, Good Morning, When the Saints Go Marching In, They Long to Be Close to You, etc., and figured that it wouldn't be the most essential thing that she had ever dropped. And that's the vibe that I got when I listened to it. It obviously sounds great because Gaga herself is an amazing vocalist, but as a companion album to Joker Folly Ado, a movie that might be up there as one of the year's biggest shit shows from what I understand, I feel like I needed the context of the movie to really enjoy this thing. There are some beautiful highlights here, but much of what was on this record was stuff I honestly wouldn't really listen to on its own, and I feel like I needed the backdrop of the movie to truly appreciate what it was doing. But I didn't end up seeing the movie, so I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even know that this thing came out when it did, and it took me another day or two to figure out that it had been released. I was honestly too busy working on a poetry project and releasing it at a time when I thought there weren't any new albums that weekend, but right after dropping my project, I found out that this one released. Big oops on this one. Had I known sooner, I may have reviewed it because Tommy Richmond this year has been a huge surprise to me. When $1 Million Baby blew up, I had a genuinely crazy reaction when I first heard it because it was unlike anything I had heard before. The mixes of synth and funk with R&B vocals and these bits of Memphis-style hip-hop and funk creeping in really genuinely blew my mind. And then the subsequent single, Devil Is a Lie, also really impressed me, so I was excited to hear more from this guy. But after listening to the album, it really didn't blow my mind all that much, unfortunately. Nothing on the record really hit me on the level that those two singles did, and to my everlasting surprise, neither single was included in the track list of this project. Maybe it's because they had been out for a few months by the time this dropped, but even still, that's bizarre. I mean, hey, Jason Derulo can include a 7-year-old song on his album, so what's a few months? I think Tommy is absolutely overflowing with talent, and I'm sure he'll continue to drop some great music, but while this album was okay, it just didn't have the memorability of his viral singles. Finneas's new album, For Crying Out Loud, came out at a fairly busy time for me, so I never got to make a proper review of it, but it helps that when I sampled it, I didn't really walk away with what I felt were enough thoughts to actually give it a proper review. Obviously, a lot of my interest in the project came because of Finneas's production work for his younger sister, Billie Eilish. I'm sure you guys might know who that is just a little bit. Maybe you've heard the name around somewhere. Though this was much more of an indie pop turn for him, and I think it's a good project. It sounds nice. I get some mixes of like Chris Martin from Coldplay, Bon Iver, and even some James Blake here and there. And Finneas is a good singer, even though this album and his overall sound on the project don't push as many boundaries as his work on Billy's albums. It's solid, I just didn't feel like I had enough to say about it in a full review. Though I will say that the title track as well as Family Feud were the two that really stuck with me, and if you pull nothing else from the album, go check out those two tracks. Very good standouts. Obviously, I reviewed Brat this year, and I love that album. Spoiler alert, it's currently maybe my album of the year. I don't know. It's either that or GNX, and honestly, it can interchange. It's kind of hard to decide. But a few months later, Charlie dropped a remix album to help continue the dominance of Brat Summer into Broadham? No, I'm not going to try again, sorry. I did check out the remix record, and it was cool. I think I just prefer Brat in its vanilla form. If nothing else, I respect that in this current era of pop song remixes just meaning the same song but with an underwhelming guest verse. This album features completely different versions of the songs with new artists all over them. Not all of them land, but this didn't really need to be as good as the base Brat album. Quite frankly, I kind of just see it as a well-deserved victory lap for an artist who dominated this year in music and finally got to reap major rewards and finally earned some real recognition for her years of innovation in music. And having finally marathoned her discography this year, I'm sorry for sleeping on Charli XCX for so long. Bon Iver dropped a new EP this year, and it was absolutely beautiful. I just didn't review it because it was a 4-track EP that only lasted 12 minutes. Hell, the first track was 12 seconds long and was basically just some ringing, so technically the album was just 3 tracks. Still, this was an amazing EP, and after 4 years of not releasing any music, it was just nice to hear Justin Vernon and the gang come back with a new project. I don't have much else to say about it other than that, and I do highly recommend checking it out. But I hope that this project is leading into a new album sometime soon. Again, having finally marathoned Bon Iver's discography, I'm ready for more music. Quite frankly, I forgot this project came out almost immediately after listening to it. I really only listened to it because it had been 4 years since Jaden dropped any new music, and having followed his career arc up to this point, I was kind of curious. And honestly, when listening to it, it barely did anything for me. Supposedly, this record focused heavily on Jaden's breakup with his longtime partner, but I barely flinched while listening to it, so I wouldn't have even known. And even if it was amazing, I probably wouldn't have reviewed it for similar reasons to the Bon Iver EP. It's 4 tracks in 11 minutes. There's barely enough here to make an impression for me. I mean, sure, LMA got a review with a 3-track EP, but that record made a bit more of an impression to me than this Jaden project. This one was pretty forgettable. A$AP Ferg dropping a new record for the first time in years seemed really exciting to me, especially after listening to Trapped Lord last year, but it feels like all I've heard about Ferg is that since that record came out in 2013, he's just kind of punched below his weight on albums since. And with this one, I kind of hear it. It's not bad, it just really doesn't do anything for me. There's not much to it that I remembered after one listen, nor anything that I really wanted to go back to. It's technically sound, just really unexciting. Ferg is a solid rapper, but there's not really much interesting to the writing or production on this record, though the track Pool was pretty great. And the hooks get more annoying than anything to me, to be honest. Features were pretty cool though, so at least there's that. Oh boy, I have to point this out, but I feel like anytime I talk about an Ab-Soul project and I don't absolutely give it like an excellent and say it's the greatest thing I've ever heard, Ab-Soul fans get very upset with me, so oh boy. The truth to me is, as great of an artist as Ab-Soul can be, and as excellent of a rapper as he can be, I feel like he hasn't quite hit the level of Control System since its release, and while he's put out good projects since, they've always had like an issue or two that have held them back for me. And I feel like that happens here with the Soulburger mixtape, because while Solo remains a good performer and lyricist, some of his beat selection to me is questionable and I think takes away from how good this project can be. I don't know if this is gonna sound like it makes sense, but it feels like in a few songs he's not being the rapper he wants to be. He's being the rapper the beat depends on him to be. I hope that made sense. It's not a bad project by any means, but I feel like it's the kind of thing I can only recommend to the most hardcore Solo Dolo fans. Fucking let Juice WRLD rest. I didn't even want to review this project because when I reviewed Juice's last posthumous record, Fighting Demons, the response to that record, specifically on TikTok, was absolutely nuts. Like, I got crazy amounts of comments from crazy amounts of people, a lot of very angry ones. And honestly, I don't even think I didn't want to review it because of the fan base. I didn't want to review it because why does this exist? I could copy and paste my Fighting Demons review that I did and just put the exact thoughts here with this project. The dude passed away 5 years ago, RIP Juice WRLD, and it's been 3 years since his last posthumous record. I mean, if this thing came out maybe 2 or 3 years ago, okay, I'd have fallen for that, but at this point, like, this just feels like grave robbing to the highest order. I mean, Fighting Demons was already grave robbing, but this one is an even greater amount of it. Just let the man rest in peace. I have been told this is supposed to be the last posthumous Juice record, and please, please be the last one. I'm begging. Okay, admittedly this one I don't actually have in the script because I didn't actually write an entry for it, unfortunately, but I did remember that I listened to it, so I'll give a mention to it. Rather, I skimmed it, but I'll give it a mention. But yes, late in the year, Rose dropped her album. I believe it was her debut album, and this became pretty big, or rather, it had a pretty big hit single that got huge over here in America. Apatu, I hope I said that right, with Bruno Mars. And admittedly, I just kind of skimmed it. It came out, again, at a pretty busy time for me, so I didn't get to make a full review, but from what I heard of it, it's not bad. I mean, Rosie is a great singer. Is it Rose or Rosie? Because I know they call her Rosie. The album is called Rosie. Either way, point is, Rose is a great singer, and she sounds great on the record, but some of the material just sounded a little bit too standard to me. Didn't really feel particularly exciting, and Apatu, again, I hope I'm saying that right, is a track that I like parts of, but there are some parts of it that kind of aren't really as fun to me. If anything, I'm just happy to see that any of the Blackpink girls have gotten some big success over here in America. A part of me thought that Jennie was going to be the first one to get a big, like, top 10 hit, but it turns out Rose did it first. Again, didn't really wow me, but I think that there's definitely going to be an audience that really enjoys this record, and rightfully so. It's decent enough. I definitely think there's room for growth on Rose's future albums after this one. And to top off 2024, one of my least favorite trends to loathe in 2024 that's probably been bubbling for years, but I'm really noticing it now. Deluxe edition re-releases of albums where the new material was better than most of what was on the original version of the album. Now, I'll give Kid Cudi some credit because Insano Nitro Mega was actually an entirely new album with wholly different material, but my point still stands. It was better than the original album, in my opinion. And yes, many of you will probably include the second part of Taylor Swift's new album on this list, but honestly, I personally loved both parts of the record, so I won't go too hard there. Same with SZA's SOS Deluxe Lana. It could have been its own new album, but the base album was already good, so I won't go too hard on it. Also, sorry for not doing a proper review of this one. It came out too late in the year for me, but I do love this album. Or you might include that Long Bed Deluxe edition of Post Malone's album that he dropped at like the 11th hour, but dude, we could be at this for hours. These are just a few that I didn't look at. I get that we live in a world where there's a battle with deluxe editions and charting them and all that stuff, but if this material that's being dropped on deluxe editions like these records is really that good, why not drop it right off the bat? What's the point in dropping an album that's not fully your best, then dropping a set of songs that makes listeners like myself scream, "Where was this?" I understand that maybe these songs are recorded after the base album is out, but if you don't feel like the base album is ready, if you feel like you're going to add more songs to the base album, don't release the base album. Wait until it's ready. Why hype the main dish if the side is actually the best part? It's so tiring. 2024 was a great year for music, but if there's one thing from this year that I'd like to leave in the past, well, I could probably think of a couple things, but if there's one that I'm gonna think of now, it's this. So yeah, a lot of records I didn't review this year. Some good, some not so good. Obviously, that's the way of life. But those are some albums I didn't review in 2024. I'm sure there are many others that I didn't get around to, and I'm sure some of you might point them out, but those are just a few. And of course, these are all just my opinions on these albums. What were some other albums that I didn't review this year? And or what were some of your thoughts on these records? Were you hoping that I reviewed some of them? And if so, I apologize. Whatever your thoughts and opinions are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And yeah, like I said, the next video that I'm going to do in the long form style is my favorite games of 2024, but that's not going to come until the beginning of the new year because I still have way too many games I have to play. Matter of fact, I don't even know if this video is going to go up before the year's out. I'm going to try my best, but we'll see. Again, I am busy with my job, so if videos are a little slower to come out in the near future, that's why. But whether or not this video goes up at the end of 2024 or beginning of 2025, this is the last video I'm going to be filming in 2024. So I'm gonna end off by just saying thank you guys for all the support this year, as always. I know I'm not the biggest YouTube channel, but I really appreciate that there's anyone who even watches these videos. Again, doing the favorite games of legacy year videos earlier this year was really fun. It was quite an undertaking, but I'm glad I was able to come out on the other side and create some stuff that I really, really enjoyed, and that hopefully you guys enjoyed as well. Again, whether I have 2 subscribers or 2 million, I'm just glad that anyone watches these videos at all. It's very greatly appreciated. And even though, unfortunately, the pace of videos might slow down in the coming year because, again, I'm going to be busy with my job and that might take priority over something like YouTube where I unfortunately don't get paid, I'm going to try my best to put out as many long-form videos as I can and keep creating content that you guys can enjoy. Again, now no longer being tethered by the series within the series, I can just talk about whatever the hell I want. As long as I'm inspired, I'll make sure to get something out. And if I can't get videos out in a decent enough time frame, I'll make sure to keep posting some community posts just to let you guys know what's going on. And of course, I'll still be posting a lot of short-form reviews, so don't worry, you'll be seeing me in 2025. Either way, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you, as always, for all the support in 2024. Thank you to those of you who still check out my videos and still hit like and all that good stuff and leave nice comments. And whether this video goes up in 2024 or 2025, I will see you guys in 2025. Peace.